now we move on to California's high-speed rail. The Legislative Analyst Office, which already has been ignored by the high-speed rail people and Jerry Brown, put out another report yesterday where they said what we already said. Don't go ahead with this because there's no funding.
There's no money.
You got a few $1 billion. You're claiming the price tag is $68 billion. You're coming up way short here. They're telling the legislature and Jerry Brown not to approve the first stream of funding to start high-speed rail. And I imagine they'll be ignored again, won't they?
Yeah, they have no direct power. All they do is tell the truth as they see it. And they're nonpartisan. They're numbers geeks. And there's no numbers even to add up here. There's no funding for this other than the bond money that you buffoons agreed to borrow and a small amount of money in from the federal government.
I don't think there's any shortage of nicknames we've come up with for people that voted for these bonds, right?
I would like to revoke
nincompoops, bird brains.
I want to revoke the citizenship
peanut heads
of anybody who voted for this. I do. You got to have your voting rights taken away. You got to have your citizenship rights taken away. I mean, this was just.
And we can go back into the archives and show you how we said back in 2008, don't vote for this. We were listing all the reasons. But we didn't know the lies were as bad as they were.
There's no way. You have to assume they're preposterous lies. That's my new default position, that whenever there's something on the ballot that we got to spend a lot of money for, and it's some kind of construction project, and it's got that whiff of union jobs and greenhouse gases, that kind of stink around it, this is screaming boondoggle. This is screaming fraud. And the default is no. There's no chance, considering the kind of people that we have running government in California, that this is an honest project that will cost anywhere near what they say and will produce the benefits that they say. It's virtually an impossibility because we just have corrupt looters and frauds that permeated government from top to bottom, state to local.
So specifically, the Legislative Analyst Office recommends that the legislature reject Jerry Brown's request to start selling $2.6 billion in bonds to start construction until the Rail Authority gives more details about its plan, including, of course, the rest of the funding. $42 billion in speculative funding, which they claim they're going to get from the federal government. But there's more. The Legislative Analyst Office also took a look at Plan B, which is to use the cap-and-trade money. This brings us back to the Global Warming Final Solutions Act and the California Air Resources Board.
And this is
how does that play into this?
This
well,
is
Jerry
the
Brown
business tax that they want to lay on companies.
Yeah, something that's a natural byproduct of certain industries, something that you exhale, carbon dioxide. They want to start charging companies if they're emitting too much of it. You have to buy credits. You have to make up for the difference between what you're allowed to emit and how much you actually emit. Now, the numbers vary like everything else. Could be $1 billion a year to start. Could be $3, $4, $5 billion after that. I've seen numbers as high as $8 billion a year. Jerry Brown has made noise about how he wants to use this money to fund high-speed rail. And the Legislative Analyst Office had an opinion about that. And it makes sense because while the high-speed rail project could eventually help the state reduce carbon emissions, it wouldn't come until after 2020. The year by which the state is trying to meet their greenhouse gas reduction goals. So what they're saying is this doesn't cut it because the construction phase of this is going to result in global warming emissions, big time. And that's what we're talking about for the next, if they actually start this, 15 or 20 years.
This is like a layer of fraud on top of fraud
it's
on
amazing.
Top of fraud. I mean, the greenhouse gas thing is bogus. And their idea to charge companies for emitting carbon dioxide is bogus. And then to apply it to the construction of the rail line when the construction itself is going to produce the greenhouse gases. I mean, this is just all nonsense. It's just all an elaborate, sophisticated con.
It is a big card game. It's a three-card Monty is what they're trying to pull on everybody. And no matter what reasonable people tell them, they continue to just steer ahead. I mean, I saw another hack today. Actually, he's a guy that's a member of the board. This Mike Rossi. He wrote an opinion piece for the San Jose Mercury News. Listen to his title, Senior Advisor to the Governor for Jobs and Business Development, a member of the California High-Speed Rail, and a former vice chairman of Bank of America.
Oh, Bank of America, yeah. That did well.
I read his whole opinion piece, and nowhere in it does it mention where the money's going to come from.
No.
It's all about, well, it's going to create jobs, and the Central Valley needs jobs.
And
well, we know that, but we're not for a brown doggle.
Nothing about all the deceit and fraud that everyone involved in this project has committed now for over 3 years.
And again talks about trying to reduce emissions because people will hop on the bullet train rather than get in their cars.
Very few people are going to use this, so it's not going to save any greenhouse gases. The airplane is always going to be superior to the train. That's never going to change. You are not going to get a significant amount of people to take this train. You just aren't. These trains will run nearly empty, up and down if they ever get built. I don't think they're ever getting built. I think they're going to end up at best with some half-assed track built out around Merced until the money runs out, and then it'll just sit there for the next 100 years, and people will laugh at it as it rusts.
You're right. It'll be in the history books. It's one of the biggest public works browndoggles in the history of California.
It's like when you drive out to San Bernardino County and you see these half-constructed suburban subdivisions where the money ran out on the developer right in the middle of the economic collapse.
Mm-hmm.
And the half-built buildings just sit there and rot. I see them on the west side. I see houses.
Oh, I see them where I live, too.
Yeah.
They started somewhere in the mid-2000s, and that was it.
Some poor guy. And when I lived at my old house, I used to see this every day when I drove my kids to school. Some poor guy built a house and ran out of money, and the thing sat there for about 9 years. Like during my entire stretch as I was taking this route to take my kids to school for 9 years, we laughed and joked about it almost every day. The house that never got built.
All right, when we come back, the chairman of the California High-Speed Rail Authority speaks. What we're going to play is a clip where he responds to the legislative analyst saying, you don't have any money to build this. It's highly speculative. Well, he has an answer to that. Of course, you know what it is. We'll play it, though, when we come back.
John and Ken Show, KFI, AM 640, more stimulating talk radio.